Hello, and welcome to our Let's Plot for Prince John. On the surface, Prince John's objective is the simplest in the game. All you need to do is start your turn with 20 power. Look, there are some game power actions. Oh, that was easy. The thing is that it probably won't be as easy as just going to your locations and gaining power. Your opponents will try to stop you, and that is where most of his deck comes in. These are the only cards that can gain Prince John power, but they all have to deal with getting faded or your opponent. Hmm. What this leads to is his deck not being so much for gaining power, but dealing with fates effectively. What this what that means is saving as much power as possible, most notably with King Richard's Crown, which allows you to pay one less power for every card you play the location it's at, which is the key target for your move and ally or item actions. So, where is the best place for the crown? The jail is a very good contender because that is where you want to be going a lot due to its gain 3 power. But the most use you can get out of it is at Friartuck's Church with 2 play card actions, and you are able to move it to the location you're about to go to, or move it from one of those 2 locations. However, if a hero is blocking Friartuck's Church, then you cannot make as effective use of the crown because you only have one of the play card actions, and you will not be gaining the power. So it really is dependent on type matchups and oh who you're playing against, how aggressive they are, and just if you think you can keep the church clear. Which brings me to the next point, warrants. You definitely don't want to stack warrants because they can be discarded all at once at one location with Friar Tuck. So you definitely want to spread them out, one at each location. Excluding the jail, because it's okay if the jail gets covered because you don't have any actions to lose up there, which is very handy. So, which order should you protect from being covered? Well, that also comes down to your matchup and who your opponent is. Uh, if in a very fate heavy matchup, you are going to want to start with Nottingham, so you are more likely to have your top fate action clear. In a matchup where you're more likely to be blitzing, the Friar Church is good, so you can keep that 2 power clear. And for middle of the road matches, it could be a good idea to keep Sherwood Forest clear because of that discard action, and that gain 1 is very nice if you need to go fate. So there's really no set order. I'm sorry, I wish I could be a bit more helpful there, but that's just uh, how the game goes sometimes. And speaking of positions, Sir Hiss should really always be going to Nottingham, just giving you the ability to fate every turn. Not that you should, because if you are just bouncing between Nottingham and Sherwood Forest, you're only gaining 1 power each turn at most. And if Robin Hood's on the board, then you're not getting anything and not progressing toward your objective at all. But maybe Peter Pan is at the Jolly Roger and you really need to be fading. So it, it's not that you should be fading every turn, it's that you can fade every turn and you can threaten it. Another interesting point about positioning are your Wolf Archers and your Sheriff. Your Wolf Archers have the ability to vanquish at adjacent locations. So they're very good to be stacked in the middle. And they give two strength for each vanquish action. And then you have the Sheriff. The Sheriff should be played to jail if you don't have any heroes out and you don't know where they might come out, because they're probably not going to be playing heroes over to the jail. Same with your wards. So, because he only gains the power when he is moved to a place with a hero, it's a good idea to keep him at a place where they're probably not going to be playing heroes. But notably, he does not have to move uh, to a space with a hero. He can move away from a space with a hero just so you can move him next turn to get another power with him. And he is really your best way to gain power. Another good way to gain power is beautiful, lovely taxes. Beautiful, lovely taxes. They are very good if you're getting faded a lot, allowing you to gain one power for every hero in the realm. Notably, Robin Hood will not give you any power for this since he kind of cancels the effect out, and King Richard prevents it from being played. But you can get a really good amount of power in Fate heavy matchups. You also have the Golden Arrow if your opponent is fading you a lot and you can prepare for it. You really want to combine the Golden Arrow with a bow and arrow so that you can keep using its effect again. This can also be done with Intimidation. And they can even stack, so you can play Intimidation, then use the bow and arrows, or vice versa. Either one works. The Golden Arrow will give you 2 power for each Vanquish with that character. So getting a whole bunch of Vanquishes is very nice. Uh, Greed is your final way to gain power, but it fully relies on your opponent triggering it by having 6 or more power. For most villains, it is pretty easy to avoid going over 6 power. But for some of them, it isn't. For the one that isn't, you should definitely be holding on to 2 greeds. For the ones where they can avoid going over 6 power, holding on to 1 greed can be very powerful, just forcing them to play a certain way. Because even if they can avoid playing around greed, it might create some awkward circumstances. And that's all of the ways to gain power. So let's go over the ways to reduce the amount of power being spent. You have Cowardice, your other condition card, which triggers when your opponent has 3 or more allies. You can play an ally from your hand for free, which is very good for Rhino Guards or the Sheriff, though you should be aiming to play the Sheriff as soon as you draw him. The Rhino Guards you should definitely have in your hand, but we'll talk about them just a little bit later. And then you have Imprison, which is an alternative way uh, of dealing with heroes, not defeating them. Imprison just allows you to move any hero that is not King Richard or Lady Cluck to the jail. Notably, this doesn't really deal with them. It doesn't get rid of their ability, but it can put them out of the way. You really only want to be using Imprison if you can get that 2 power back pretty quickly. So, if you're at Friar Tuck's church, you can use Imprison to put the hero over to jail and get that 2 power back immediately. And now you have Friar Tuck's church open. Maybe you want to put down a warrant or something else to protect it. Uh, with the crown, it's only 1 power, which is a lot easier to play because you can even play that at Sherwood Forest. Next, you have your bow and arrows and intimidation, as I talked about a little bit earlier. Just able to keep your allies around and not have to replay them. Very handy. Especially handy to have your bow and arrows and your golden arrow on the Sheriff of Nottingham, so that it is just a mobile ally that can defeat any hero basically anywhere with a little help, probably from a wolf archer. Since you don't really care about those guys sticking around, sorry, wolf archers. But if they do with intimidation, then great. Rhino guards should really only be played once one of Robin Hood, King Richard, Lady Cluck, or Little John have been played, since they are a very expensive investment with 3 power. That's the whole turn in jail, that you are just throwing that power away, not putting towards your objective. But if you can get them out through cowardice, very handy. And of course, if you can get it out through cowardice, don't wait to do that. Clear up that hand space. But you can always try to have one in hand to deal with one of these four heroes because they are devastating if left unchecked, which we will get to in just a moment. Then you also have Trigger Nutsy. Trigger is a cheaper alternative to the Rhino Guards. His ability doesn't really matter all that much, just that his allies get -1 strength at his location. It doesn't really matter since he is 4 strength, and so long as the Wolf Archers aren't at his location, him plus the Wolf Archers can deal with anyone. Even with an Allen buff, in which case the only one he couldn't deal with the archers is Lady Cluck. Then you have Nutsy, the opposite ability of Trigger, of +1 strength for each ally at her location, which is pretty good to either buff up those Rhino Guards to be +1 to deal with your 5 strength heroes, or you can also give that strength to your Wolf Archers so that they are strong enough to deal with Maid Marian or Friar Tuck all on their own. The best part about Nutsy is that if you can use the Wolf Archers or the Rhino Guards all on their own, then Nutsy stays in play. And you do not have to replay her effect. And you can just replace the Wolf Archers or the Rhino Guards later on. So that's really it for the villain side of cards. It really is just try to save as much power as possible. Prince John early game is at his weakest. Once he has the realm full of warrants and wolf archers and the sheriff, then he is very strong, especially once he has, like, say, 10 power. Sure, it would not be great to spend the 3 power to the Rhino Guards, but you can do it pretty easily to just deal with one of your heroes. Speaking of those heroes, you have Robin Hood and King Richard, the two strongest heroes. Robin Hood reduces all power gained by 1. This might not sound too bad, but it is for every single different action, not just the first power in a turn you have gained. So the sheriff's ability is completely shut off, and you would also not gain your 1 from Nottingham or Sherwood Forest. Having that said, if you have 10 power, you're not hurting for power, and you could probably put your Rhino Guards, your bow and arrows, your Nutsy. You could probably deal with him. But early game, it can be rough. King Richard is always pretty bad. He prevents the use of effects from being played. This means you cannot use intimidation to save 5 strength worth of allies. You cannot play taxes if your board is overrun with heroes. And you can also not play set a trap, which I did not talk about earlier. It's handy to have, but not really necessary. But King Richard might be played to the jail, and your Rhino Guards might be over at Sherwood. Can't set a trap for King Richard. Lady Cluck is only a problem due to her strength. Her ability is that she cannot be moved to the jail. And you might think, oh, okay, so I just have to defeat her. Well, she is a whopping 6 strength, which is Rhino Guards or Trigger plus a Wolf Archers. Even a Rhino Guards and a bow and arrows aren't enough to get rid of her. It would be possible to get rid of her with Nutsy and your 2 copies of Wolf Archers, but still 4 power worth of investments gone. But if you have Intimidation, it's not too bad. Then you have Little John, who is able to steal power directly and place it onto him and keep it from Prince John until he gets vanquished. This isn't too bad in the late game, similar to Robin Hood. Once you have that set up, you can just play your Rhino Guards, your bow and arrows, maybe an intimidation. But early game, if you only have a little power, it can be unfortunate because it might not even be worth it to vanquish him at that point. And those are the four big problems. You also have five minor annoyances. May Marian, the biggest one, when she is defeated, she will find and play Robin Hood. Notably, if she is at a location and there's a warrant, Robin Hood would be played and trigger the warrant, unfortunately only for half of the payout, but it's still an extra power. But if Robin Hood is in play, it can also be good to put him at a more advantageous location for you. But if he's not in play, it can be annoying because you do not want him in play. Even if you can just intimidation Robin Hood right away, it's still not great. Friar Tuck, the only annoying part about him is that he prevents warrants from being stacked on top of each other. He is 3 strength, sure, but it's not too bad. If you can imprison him and let his ability only happen once per game, that's great. You can also vanquish him if you're cool with spreading the warrants out. Alanadale gives all the heroes +1 strength, which just prevents a simple Nutsy plus Rhino Guards, or Rhino Guards plus bow and arrows. Uh, it's just maybe one more strength you weren't expecting. But he's only 2 strength, so a singular Wolf Archers can take him out. Skippy cannot be vanquished with Wolf Archers, but you have plenty of other allies that he's not really that big of a problem. And Toby is the one of the most useless fate cards in the game. Sorry, Toby. Toby just gets shuffled into the fate deck when he is defeated. He's only 2 strength, so single Wolf Archer, and he prevents stronger fate cards from being pulled because he just clogs up the fate deck, like Robin Hood or King Richard. Maybe you're going to draw Robin Hood next turn. Nope, Toby fate one more time to get him. So as Prince John, it's really not that bad of an idea to defeat Toby, but you might want to keep it around for some beautiful, lovely taxes. Just depends on the game state and everything else. Then, your only non-heroes are Clever Disguises and Steal from the Rich, 3 copies of each. Steal from the Rich uh, is the main way that opponents will stop you from winning, because it's the only way to directly force Prince John to lose power. So you'll be dealing with that a lot in the late game, but if you keep your board pretty clear of heroes, you can deal with the few heroes that are remaining to get that power back. Then you have Clever Disguise, which will probably be used on Robin Hood or King Richard. And the best advice I have for that is to get rid of them immediately because they can be played at any time. And if you have, say, 4 power remaining, if a Clever Disguise is played onto Robin Hood, you can just immediately get rid of that Clever Disguise. And then to steal from the richest play, maybe you're playing Ursula or someone with 2 faith or a multiplayer game. Now you only have 2 power to steal instead of the 4 you would have had, and the disguise is still there. So just a very good idea to get rid of the clever disguise as soon as possible. And that is it for Prince John. His locations, notably, all of the game power actions can be covered except for the jail. So really, you want to keep going to the jail as much as possible, but stopping for the fate actions when you can. Friar Tuck's Church, also a great location for playing cards out with the crown, and 2 power is not too bad. But thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week. Bye, everyone.